welcome Thomas Caldwell, a journalist who has done extensive reporting in the Far East. You work for United Press International. You have your own Substack, the Aurelian Column, and we're going to talk about a lot of different areas. But I just want to welcome you to the show. And
thank you, Richard. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you for taking time out of your schedule. Look, talk about the reporting that you've done. I noticed that you've been in Japan and other parts of the Far East. Let's talk about that first.
Well, I lived as an expatriate mostly in the Far East for about 28 years. I was involved in political strategy. I was a lobbyist in Washington, commuting back and forth to the Far East. I then got into mainstream journalism. I was mostly a broadcaster. I was with UPI Radio for some years. If anyone heard radio in the 1990s, chances are they heard me. My career ended in 1997, I believe I left. My last big gig was the handover of Hong Kong to China. I was the acting bureau chief there. It was a fascinating story, and I haven't been back since. I don't want to lose the memories on that. But I've been in the news business on and off, and media. Once you're in media, it's in your blood, kind of like ink is some ways people have talked about it. But the thing that's happened is journalism in the United States is just pretty much vaporized, and it's not gone very well. So I'm a bit of an outlaw because I came from that generation that was the last one where the fourth estate actually meant something. Yes.
Well, I hear that some of the news readers that you can see on cable news, they're good at reading the press releases.
Yeah, I haven't owned a television in some decades.
Okay.
I can't imagine why anyone would watch television, let alone pay for it.
Right.
It's far better to have to there's other sources, mostly on the video platforms on the internet, but you still have to read.
Right.
Most people, one of the things that gets to me is a lot of people talk about they're doing research, quote unquote, and most people don't know how to do research. Let me give you an example of how it used to be. Everyone hears about Walter Cronkite. Remember him? You remember how long the news broadcasts were at the time in like the 70s and 1980s? They were 30 minutes. They were 30 minutes long with advertising. So probably you had maybe 25, 26 minutes of news, and you were able to cover the world during the Cold War with the Soviet Union. Now you have 24/7 news and and I won't name any of them, and also you have podcasts where people will talk for hours, and very few people understand that information is a necessary part of life, but there's more to life than just information.
That's right.
That's something we've lost.
Well, you mentioned that you were there when Hong Kong was handed over to Communist China. Can you just comment on? Look, I think a lot of Americans, we thought, well, we're trading with China, and then they're going to become more prosperous, and then they're going to want to, become more of a partner, and we don't have to worry about wars with them. I mean, something like that. So,
There's a lot to China. First off, China is more like a little Europe. Many people don't realize Chinese, for example, is not a spoken language, it's a written language. Mandarin, Cantonese, and there's other languages and dialects. There's an old saying that I didn't come up with it, but I've heard it a few times, is there's a difference between drinking from the fountain of knowledge and just gargling. And a lot of Americans like to not really delve into things. For example, reading books. If you read my Substack channel, I now do book reviews because books are so critical to really get into things. The thing about China is, one, they're not as stable and people think they are. And two, the Chinese are not all monsters. I was last in China in 2016. I spent a month there. And the last time I had been there was the early 90s, and it was night and day. It was like a little provincial, Beijing was like a little provincial town in the early 1990s. And now Beijing looks like a scene from the movie Blade Runner. It's quite drastic. But there's a big misconception Americans have towards not just China, but the rest of the world. One of the best things that anyone can do is travel. And travel it not just expands the mind, it gets rid of bigotry, it teaches you about your own culture as opposed to those of others. I think China is a big misinterpretation. There are the Communist Party that runs it are not the nicest of people, but like anywhere else, the average person on the street just wants to get by and have a decent life.
Okay, well, let's look at that. I mean, I've met some delightful I mean, I visited Beijing very briefly, so I don't even think that I could claim that I never lived there. But
great subway system, I'll tell you. I loved it when I was there. That was a great place.
The average, I mean, even the Chinese Americans, their children, they study hard and they want to contribute to our society. I get that. I guess my question is, we're dealing not with the average Chinese, who many of them are fine people. We're dealing with Xi Jinping's
We're dealing with communism, which is a disease that has been poisoning the human condition since it came out in the 1800s. Okay.
Right.
Communism spoils everything. Communism ruins everything. Communism destroys cultures. There's nothing good about it.
Right.
It's not a system. It is a disease.
Right.
And it ruins everything. And it's basically a philosophy where humans are reduced to the level of productive machines.
Right.
And I would urge people to read about it. A lot of people talk about books like Das Kapital or the Communist Manifesto or Mao Zedong's Little Red Book or Mein Kampf. Very few people actually read these books to see what was actually going on at the time. The thing about China, remember, though, is that it has a very small oligarchy that's running it. And the one thing the Chinese are very much into is stability. This is something people don't really get. That's why they're focusing, and they've been focusing on building a middle class, because they know that stabilizes things. Right. I mean, they just honestly, are they out to take over the world? They're out to exert their power. I don't think anyone wants to take over the world or would even bother trying at this point. There's always these myths about it, like Nazi Germany was supposed to be taking over the world. And if you look into that, that really wasn't true. Or the Japanese, World War II, the reason they attacked Pearl Harbor is because their oil supply was cut off. Very few people delve into the facts of anything, especially in the modern day. And now more than ever, people have to look at facts and not just speculation.
Okay, well, all right. Well, and I hear what you're saying. Let me ask you this. It seems to me that there is an alliance between Communist China and Western corporations that like to do business with China and have no problem to even work on human surveillance systems with China, AI to surveil human beings. And you mentioned communism as a type of disease or virus or poison that ruins things, which I do agree with that. What if there's an alliance between people who have a kind of a Marxist perspective in the West, in our own government, in many corporations, Klaus Schwab, Larry Fink, these are people who, they don't talk about communism, but they have no trouble forcing racial gender quotas, imposing their will, using the green
it's all
climate change.
designed, yeah, it's all designed to dehumanize us. Okay.
Right.
You're dealing with power. Now, I've worked in
Right.
Congress, I've done that sort of thing, and you're dealing with power.
Right.
Okay. You're not dealing with morality, you're dealing with power. Power is the sake of power. If you read 1984 by George Orwell, it's covered in there. Okay.
Right.
There's one of these jokes is that make 1984 fiction again. You know, we should have hats like that now. No, these people are into power and control. All right. This has been going on since humans have been around, power and control.
Right.
You can't have a good, I think it was Aristotle, I'm not sure. It was who was the Greek philosopher that taught Alexander the Great? I think I'm just sorry, I'm forgetting my ancient history right now.
Plato? What was that?
I'm
Plato?
not sure. I don't think let's not say, but the thing is, it was a saying back then is it's better to have a good man to rule a city than good laws. Morality is out the window.
Right.
When you're dealing with something like communism or Marxism or that sort of philosophy or any sort of philosophy that's all about power, morality just stands in the way. I mean, you're dealing where evil comes from is the inability to empathize with another human being. That's what I've seen in my travels and in my experience. When you can't put yourself in the shoes of someone else, that's where the bad stuff really starts. So the people at the top are, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was just, okay, I want to respond to what you're saying. So I think you're very accurate in this, the inability to see other human beings as human or valuable or inherently valuable. And so I guess my question is, the United States in 1776 came out with this document, the Declaration of Independence, where it asserted the idea of God-given rights and limits on government, limits on power, and we've had a pretty good run with some ups and downs for a few hundred years. And my question to you is, isn't the past almost 250 years, we're getting near, isn't that an anomaly? We think that we're going to go on for many more centuries, but maybe this was an exception to the rule, and
it certainly was. It certainly was an exception to the rule. The people that founded the United States took inspiration from ancient Greece. They took inspiration from Magna Carta, which was putting a restraint on the power of the king, but not for the average person, just the nobles. Okay,
right.
But it was a step up the ladder. Now the U.S. is an anomaly. I mean, humans throughout most of history, you either do what you're told or you're gone. And this is why they said back in the day, I believe it was Ben Franklin, he said, a republic if you can keep it. Now, the Constitution is something they don't teach in school. They don't go over it. I've had young people say, well, we'd like to learn civics, but we don't get it in school anymore. No, the U.S. system of government was brilliant, the Constitution. We made changes that should not have been made, in my view. Senators should have never been directly elected. That happened in the early 20th century. They used to be sent in by the legislatures. And as a result, they were immune from the passions of the day. You would never have seen a Hillary Clinton elected as a senator if we kept the original system in place. Presidents were always were open to as many terms as they can handle. If someone's doing their job, why get rid of them? Presidents used to be sworn in March. Many people forget that. It was Franklin Roosevelt that changed that in 1944 during World War II. Most people can't name the amendments. They don't know anything about it. And then people are saying we got to get rid of the Electoral College, for example. No, because that's designed to balance the power between the countryside and the cities. If you got rid of that and it was just general a general vote for whoever's president, you'd have a handful of metropolitan areas easily controlled that would be running the country. And then you would have a real third world nation. The United States is not immune to the march of history. I mean, if we blow it, we blow it. I mean, North America, I mean, you could easily fit Europe into the northwestern corner of our continent without any difficulty. We're a massive country. But we do have a system that most people don't follow and they don't utilize. They just vote every so often, you know, and that's it. For example, every member of Congress has a district office, okay? Every member of Congress, House of Representatives, and they're there quite often. That's why Reagan National Airport's there. It's too convenient to close, you know. That's why members of Congress are always flying back and forth to their districts. How many people ever bother to go visit their congressman or congresswoman at the district office and talk? Very few people ever do that, and it's not difficult to do. How many people send letters? Email, they don't pay attention, but if you write a real nice letter to a member of Congress, they're going to pay attention to that. Okay? Most people just don't participate in the system. They're just too busy. They can't be bothered. Our system of government was never designed to be ignored. And that's why all this stuff has happened. That's why, as I've said in my podcast and I've been writing, is that I think that the bad guys are going to do everything they can, both legal and illegal, to prevent Donald Trump from getting into office. Because they're not interested in this country or the institution. The American Constitution was by far one of the most brilliant, if not the most brilliant, documents ever written in history of its kind. And if you ignore that, well, you know, if you don't use it, you lose it, you know?
Well, okay, let's talk about this election for a little bit. So
okay.
I guess, I mean, the silver line, okay, I can see there's a very good chance that the powers that be, they do not want Donald Trump to be back in the White House. And a lot of people that I know are working in various ways in the elections, of course, praying to try to help him to, in a fair election, regain that office. I mean, the silver lining is that there are a lot of people who were sleeping who are waking up.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's kind of sad that it takes this level of threat to our republic to wake people up. I think a lot of people are awake.
We don't need people to wake up. We need people to get out of bed, put on their boots, and march out the door and do something. I hear this a lot. Oh, waking up.
Okay.
A lot of people waking up, but they're sitting on the sofa, eating the snacks, drinking the beer, yelling at their TVs.
Right. Okay. Well,
they're not. I worked as a poll watcher in 2019, so I've got to see the system. I wish I had been one in 2020. Then I would have probably been able to make a little difference in Virginia, where I'm based. But the thing is that we talk about this, but it's one thing to know what's going on, another thing to do something about it. How many people watching us now have ever bothered to call their congressman or their senator? But you just make a phone call or call the White House switchboard and let their opinion be known. That's something that nobody ever does. And this White House, I don't think it would make any difference. But if you have a member of Congress, especially a member of the House, and they're getting 300 or 400 phone calls saying, don't do this, they're probably going to listen to you a little bit more. Again, using the system. You have a system, but very few people are actually participating in it. They're just saying, oh, they're in charge, we've lost. I mean, it's surrender. I'm not surrendering.
Well, I mean, it is true that, I mean, I was shocked to find that I believe 30 or 40% of gun owners do not vote. And I think there's one political party that has publicly said that they want to confiscate your firearms and you're not voting. I mean,
Well,
that's
it's not just not voting, but I mean, I've done my time at gun shows, and there's nothing more pathetic than a very morbidly obese individual in one of those scooters with an AR-15 over his shoulder saying, "Come and take it."
right.
The reality is that most people are not going to run into the streets with their guns if Trump is not elected. I don't think that's going to happen. There might be at some point in the future where people are going to fight back, but people don't really fight back unless they've lost everything. I mean, that's when change really happens. But you don't want to get to that point. I mean, one of the words people have been using is civil war, and I'm so sick of hearing that because I've been to countries that have been ripped apart. I also have something is everyone in my family seems to have had children late. My father grew up in the 1930s. He was going to grammar school in the 1930s during the Depression, and he got to meet real Civil War veterans. They were going to the schools back then. You know what they said? Civil War was a bad idea. We should have come up with a better solution. Okay.
Really?
It was
Really?
a horror. And
Wow.
it's not this romantic thing where everyone's on a horse with a hat with a big feather on it with their saber. No. If you talk about it's like something like Yugoslavia, no, you don't even want to go there. You don't want to think about it.
Right.
No one's going to be able to go to the dentist and get their teeth cleaned. They'll all die of tooth decay. No, you don't want to get there. So I'm really tired of people saying we're going to have a civil war. One, I hope and pray no. But two, we have a system. It's just a matter of people participating. Now, the election. What can we do? Election is something, it's a treasure. Would you agree?
Yes.
How do you guard a treasure? You limit access to it. Okay. You control the access to it. If you have a home, you control the access to your home, a children's school, for sure these days, given how things can go, a bank, your business, your house of worship, whatever. You control who comes in. And that's what you have to do with an election. This is why the other side is using all these mail-in ballots and what have you. When I lived overseas, I voted in elections, but mail-in ballots were pretty formalized things. You had to usually go to the American embassy and register to get one. But now, no other country I know of is going to be taking mail-in ballots or ballots that are stuffed into collection boxes or things like that. This is all being done because the people in power are not interested in right or wrong. They just want power. And they know that most people are not going to object. They're going to be angry. As I said, you don't want someone waking up. You want someone getting out of bed.
Well, the current administration loves to demonize anybody who questions the 2020 election as election denier. Any Trump supporter is a fascist or a white supremacist.
Good.
So
good.
I guess
Let them.
Yeah, we have to get beyond
you can't be scared of words. Okay.
Yeah.
If the bad guys are not going to say nice things about you.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not looking for their approval, and no one else should be either. We got a system, use it.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, volunteer to be a poll watcher.
Right.
And be really vigilant about it. It's actually a fascinating process. That's why I knew that I think something was up in Virginia, because when I worked as a poll watcher in 2019, there were two machines at the polling station. I'm not going to go into the actual equipment. I'm not really sure what make it was, but I know when they printed it out, it was all printed on a little paper tape, and most of the time was taken with write-in ballots. Write-in ballots are not even looked at, by the way. Just most people don't think, they think, oh, if I voted for my Aunt Mary, it's going to be recorded. No, it's going to be ignored pretty much. But then they print out a paper tape. There's a number. I looked at it. The Democratic representative looked at it. It was then given. It was a process took about 15-20 minutes. So while watching the returns in 2020, I was shocked when I saw how things were delayed for several hours, and it didn't really make any sense. Now, what happened, I don't know, but I found it suspicious even then. Yeah, they're going to demonize us. So what?
Okay, well, let's talk about, look, right now in our political system, we have two major parties. We have the Democrat Party, which is essentially a socialist.
It's not the Democratic Party of John
Right.
F. Kennedy, that's for sure.
Right. So we have and then quasi-communist party, and with as Trevor Loudon has been writing about, close ties with the Chinese Communist Party, etc. And then we have the Republican Party, which should be the champion of limited government and freedom and election integrity. Well, look what's happening in Georgia right now. They have elections security board. I forget the exact name. That they're putting in some very common sense safeguards, and I believe the Republican Party, the Secretary of State, the governor, they're not interested. So
not. I'm not a Republican, by the way. I just in that particular in 2019 I represented the Republicans doing that. But no, I mean I think this is the term uniparty.
Right.
You're dealing with people that just feel they're not accountable, and the reason they feel they're not accountable is nobody's holding them to account. People are complaining, but they're not actually doing anything. Yeah, we have a two-party system in this country. Remember, the founding fathers didn't like the idea of political parties. Right, but you can't really, I mean, the whole thing is stacked against. You have the libertarians, which really don't, I was a member of the Libertarian Party in the late 70s, not too long after it was started. And I left because it was quite obvious way back then they weren't interested in taking power. You have to have an interest in taking power. You have to have an interest in winning, not making a statement. You want to win. And I don't see that in many of the people that are, rubbing their hands over what's going to happen in November.
Well, we're running out of time. Let me show people a few of your websites. You're doing very, very high, and maybe you can comment. Let me hold on here. Let me grab this. So, okay, I found you have a Substack, aureliancolumn.substack.com.
Yeah, it's named after Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who was the author of the book Meditations, which I recommend every American read.
Okay, and I see you have an article, "A Damn Fool Journalist and Why That Is." What is that about?
Well, I wrote that earlier this year after Gonzalo Lira, an American, was killed in Ukraine by the Ukrainian government. He was put in prison for his YouTube reporting on the goings-on there during the war. It's a little bit autobiographical, to be fair, but it was somebody had come up to me and said, well, he was foolish to stay in Ukraine and report. He should have gone somewhere nice and safe. And because I've been a foreign correspondent and I've been in the crosshairs quite literally for reporting things. And when you're young and crazy, like all foreign correspondents are at one point, you don't really think about your own safety. He paid the ultimate price. And the real tragedy, I wouldn't say tragedy, I would have to say criminal. The U.S. State Department just let him out. He died in prison of pneumonia, supposedly, but all for reporting what was going on there, freedom of speech. He was being, it's a real evil thing that happened to him. Americans used to be protected by our government when we were overseas, at least back in the day. They don't do that anymore. What's going on in Ukraine is a crime.
I mean, I've noticed that they've left a few journalists rot in Russian prisons. I mean, it is, journalism seems to be a pretty, if you're doing as a legitimate foreign journalist, it does seem to be dangerous, and I guess the government doesn't really care about it too much.
Used to, not anymore.
Let me show, here is MikeCampen.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, Mike Campen. Mike, short for microphone, camera, pen. Yes. Yeah. A little bit of an older picture of me there.
Okay. But where no, is that in America or
that was taken in? That was actually taken by a friend in Tokyo. Oh, way back when. and that was just, I haven't bothered changing it. I think, you know, that was back when my heyday, and that was taken in Tokyo, Japan many years ago when I was based there. I lived in the Far East for about 28 years. I returned in 2009.
Okay, and then let me show you. You and I were talking about a movie called.
Yeah, this I recommend very strongly. This came out in 2017. It's called In Search of Liberty. It's a docudrama. I got to speak once some time ago to the producer of this, or the guy that put this together. This is a gem which has been totally ignored, and it's one of the most entertaining family videos of its kind about the Constitution. It's something that should have been showing in schools. When I was a kid, we would have shown something like this in school. It's about a family, a middle-class American family who are visited by a mysterious, rather portly gentleman with spectacles and longish hair named Ben. And he teaches them about the Constitution, and it's very well done. I can't recommend this enough.
Okay, that's in search of liberty.com.
Yeah, they don't know I'm promoting this to them, but this is a real gem. I recommend it. I don't think it's available electronically anymore. You have to get the DVD, but it is worth it if you can find it.
You're not getting a royalty payback from.
No, I don't. They don't even know. I just mentioned this to you not that long ago. I just started watching it the other day. I'm supposed to be giving a speech to a group on the 18th. Trump sentencing day. That'll be interesting. They wanted me to talk on the Constitution, where it went wrong, and what we need to do to restore it. And I was just watching that the other night. That's in my library, and I really enjoy that. That's something you buy and you give to friends. It's family friendly. It's very well done, and we need more people to care about their culture and their history, because our Constitution is the result of all of the struggle and suffering of all of our ancestors, you know, from Europe, who really sacrificed so much to give us what we have. And the fact that we don't honor that, we don't honor our ancestors, we don't honor these people who really who really just gave it all. I actually, it's been pointed out. You remember Paul Harvey, right?
Yes.
Okay, there's actually something you can find if you look for it. He actually talked about the fate of all the signers of the Declaration of Independence. They did pledge their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor, and a lot of them paid for everything. Very few people who signed the Declaration of Independence came out unscathed. Most of them really lost everything. And that sort of thing we don't really remember. We don't really think about. We should.
Yeah. Well, I really want to thank you for coming on the show. You obviously have a lot of knowledge and wisdom, and I do encourage people to go to your Substack or AurelianColumn.substack.com.
Aurelian Column, yes.
Yes. Thank you again, and hope to see you again.
Okay, Richard. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Have a great day.